2 weeks ago, I made an Indo European conlang written using Chinese characters. As many of you, rightfully, pointed out, that's stupid! But why? Why is it so bad to write an Indo European language using Chinese characters? Well, it's not. They should actually add that. The language would go viral. And here's why. So, a writing system is, believe it or not, a system for writing the words that occur in a language. There are generally two schools of thought. A word has two natures: how it's spoken, its phonological component, and what it means, its morphological component. In an alphabet, named after the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, alpha and well, let's pretend it's still beta. Every letter is assigned to a phoneme that occurs in the language, and the letters are strung together to write a word the same way phonemes are strung together to speak a word. There are variations like in abjad, named after Arabic's first four letters, where only the consonants are written, and in abugida, named after Hebrew's first four letters, translated into an Ethiopian language, where every letter is two phonemes, but the idea is still the same. It's still the sound being written down. The advantages of the system are clear. You can tell how to pronounce a word just by looking at it. The disadvantages include every language has a different phonology, so languages have to adapt the alphabet to their use, which leads them to use different letters to represent different phonemes, so the whole thing breaks down. Not to mention allophony. Phonology is just way too complex to be expressed using a simple alphabet. If the meaning is written down, it's a logogram, which is also from Greek. A crude drawing is made of the object in question, and that drawing represents the object, no matter how it's pronounced. The advantages of this system are sweeping. As long as you've memorized the characters, the writing system itself, you don't have to understand a lick of Mandarin or any other language written using Hansa. You can understand it based on the meaning alone. The disadvantages are equally clear, however. For one thing, it ties you down to the semantics of Chinese, while phonology is more easily adaptable. And for words like fire, tree, big, it's easy to see the connection between the drawing and the meaning. But complicated words and abstract concepts are harder to draw, and by this point in the evolution of language, both meaning and drawing have abstracted, and it's basically an arbitrary set of lines, not to mention loanwords. Before I give examples, it's worth noting that there are two kinds of Chinese. Actually, there's a lot more than two kinds of Chinese, but there are two kinds of Chinese characters. Traditional, the original ones used in Taiwan, and simplified, the dumbed down version used in mainland China. I'll focus on simplified because they're more common, and Prosian is spoken somewhere around western Sichuan. There are six different kinds of character. Take an example for each. Xiang Xing, or pictogram. This word, ko, means mouth. It's shaped like an open mouth. It's that obvious. Now, more intricate objects like a heart, xin, no longer really match up with their depiction as previously stated, but this is still the one you're most likely to guess just by looking at it. Zhi, or ideogram. If a word is an abstract concept, you can't exactly draw a picture of it, but you can still give someone an idea. This word, shang, means up. You can't draw up, but you can draw a thing with a smaller thing on top of it, and so became shang. Functionally speaking, there's not much difference between literally drawing something and drawing a metaphor for it, but Chinese scholars make the distinction. Hui Yi, or compound ideogram. It's not uncommon in Chinese for two existing characters to be combined to form a new character with some combined meaning. The word kan, to see, is a combination of hand and eyes, for obvious reasons. This is where things get tricky. When characters are used in conjunction, they grow together and are difficult to identify over time. I think you'd be hard pressed to recognize Nian, year, as a person with corn on their back. Now, if a word is used frequently enough to form these compounds, then it gains a shorthand, what we call a radical. Radicals are going to be very important to xing sheng, or phonosemantic compounds. So Mandarin doesn't have a lot of possible syllables, and it certainly didn't in the past. Cantonese has 6 tones to Mandarin's 4, and it's still not enough. That's why if you're talking about a white mouth, you might call it bai ko, but if you're talking about white on its own, you call it bai si to distinguish it from all the other bais. Now, if you don't notice it there, all these have something in common. They share this section. That's no accident. If you didn't guess by the name, a phonosemantic compound is one where one character gives the sound and the other gives the meaning. One such character, bai, is a combination of the sound of white and this radical with the meaning of one. The radical essentially puts it in one of 189 categories, 214 in traditional, like people, emotions, liquids, food, that sort of thing. You can read this as the word pronounced like white with a meaning relating to numbers, and sure enough, it means 100. Now, this makes it look like Chinese writes down the sound a word makes. Don't get carried away with this. Xiu, which means rotten, would be read as the word pronounced like to examine with the meaning of wood. But it is pronounced Hsu, and this is pronounced Kao, and it can get worse. You can determine that these were pronounced similarly 3,000 years ago by looking at them now. So, like I said, an arbitrary collection of lines. Jia, jie, or phonetic loan. People get confused sometimes. With multiple meanings attached to the same pronunciation, the most common one gets first priority when being assigned to a character, even when that's inaccurate. This is a stylized depiction of clouds, used to mean cloud, the word yun. But the word to say is pronounced identically, yun, and it's more common. So this one gets to be the cloud swirl, and cloud becomes a compound of cloud and rain. Although that's only in traditional because in simplified they dropped the rain, and now these two words are pronounced and written the same. Chuan, chu, or derivative cognate. Sometimes a character can be spelt multiple ways, and over time those two spellings become different words with different meanings. I couldn't find a good example for this, but don't worry, this is the rarest by far. So what's wrong? Why couldn't we use these for English or Prosian? Well, let's look at an example. Last time I chose something stupid, so let's do something nice and simple. I am growing. The character for I is weirdly complex. Am growing is normally first made into I grow before it translates, but luckily for English, Chinese actually uses the same system of am growing. The word for am is zai, which brings us to the first reason why not. The word am in I am growing is the same word as in I am a dragon, but in Chinese the word zai in 我在称正 is a different word than the one in 我是龙. In fact, zai better translates as am space dot 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 ing. So how do we write this in English? Well, we could use this character for am space dot 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 ing, but that's not one word, so at that point you're basically translating it into Chinese. In fact, it's worse than it looks because this verb form is the same as the one used as a gerund. How would I solve it? Well, I would use 是 for am in both cases, but I can't use 在 for ing because I'll probably also have to use it for now and currently, so there's really no existing word for dot 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 ing. Dang. If only I had started this video with 6-part instructions on how to make new Chinese characters. So you might have noticed grow is 2 words, and that's because in Proto-Indo-European, for lack of a better phrasing, verbs are prioritized, as in, verbs usually get a unique word and nouns are derived later. In Chinese, it's a bit different. The word for grow, like a lot of verbs, is made up of one of a select few group of verbs, and then a content word for meaning. In this case, the verb cheng is to become, achieve, to accomplish, and the functional part, zhang, means long or straight. Now, obviously no one would understand it to mean this, but the bottom line is that there doesn't exist a single word for to grow. And the same is true for a lot of verbs. So again, you have to choose between 3 words, staying consistent with Chinese, or 2 words staying accurate to English. And in Prosian, which I told you we'd get to, this is only 1 word, ijre, which brings me to probably the most important. Look at this phrase, 在成长. What information does it carry? These 2 words are growth, and this is that it's currently happening. 3 words, 2 meanings. That's all. But look at this. It's John Port. The phrase am growing. What information does it carry? Well, the idea of growing and that it's happening currently, but also that it's specifically me doing it. 2 words, 4 meanings. And in Prosian, the word jre carries the idea of growing, it's happening currently, it's happening as a matter of fact, it's specifically me doing it, and that I'm not causing something to grow, I'm just growing. 1 word, 6 meanings. In languages like Polish, there's so much meaning that the subject is implied. This is what we call a pro-drop language, where the entire sentence becomes 1 word, rosne. So, how do we reconcile it? Well, Prosian is not very pro-dropping. I would call it anti-dropping if I was sure that's what it meant. I chalk that much up to Chinese influence. And I'm sure you guys were plenty mad that that appeared to be the extent of Chinese influence, but the focus of that video was Proto-Indo-European. I promise more Chinese influence if I get around to expanding on that video. But in the last video, I had no qualms about using multiple Chinese characters for 1 word if a word has multiple meanings. I used the particle le to represent past tense, essentially as the spelling of ed, although its Chinese usage is for perfective. Using it like this would be closer to I have finished dance. So if I was tasked with making a writing system for English using Hanzi, I would coin a new character for ing, a phonosemantic compound using this character, the sound of am-ing, and the meaning of radical 48 work, because it's talking about some sort of action being in progress. To solve the syntax problem, I'd also make a new character for to grow, It's kind of awkward to make phonosemantic compounds in English where homophones are relatively rare, so I'll use this character Ming because it means glow, and the semantic radical 140 grass. And so in the end, I would use these four characters to represent I am growing. For Prosian, it's more difficult because it also has to be realistically evolved. In Japanese, they actually still use two kanji for the one word seicho, but Japanese also has kana, so it can afford for them to be more abstract. Also, seicho is a loan word from Chinese. I want Prosian to assert its Indo-Europeanness against Chinese. That's the point of setting it there. So, I would still use a single word for to grow, but it would be this word, growth, and then the noun form I would derive off using some extra modifier like chu to produce. Someone also informed me that the use of le for perfective is actually relatively recent, so I'll instead use wan to complete or to finish. In writing, we probably don't need to include person and number. Indicative is the default without the addition of special characters, and I wouldn't indicate the passive voice because the active voice, where you're causing something to grow, I would use a different character for. And for Polish, well, Polish I probably wouldn't write using Hansa.